This is the Texas Land Guys podcast, hosted by brothers Tim Dosh and Tom Dosh. With their partners David Marshall and Tripp Rich, they have built DMRE, the leading land brokerage in Texas. With decades of experience brokering deals between landowners and real estate developers, they take you inside the deals that move the market.
Welcome to the Texas Land Guys podcast and Happy New Year. Tim and Tripp, it's pretty exciting to be in 2026.
Yeah.
Flew by.
Can't believe how fast 2025 went. It's crazy. We're already in 2026.
It's fun to be in season 2 of our podcast and in preparation for this episode where we're going to talk about storylines of 2025 and 2026 and then some predictions for this year, 2026. I went back and listened to our episode from last year, and it's weird to go back and listen to like what we thought a year ago. And then also to be like, it's been an entire year since that episode because it is absolutely flown by, which is pretty crazy. But I think we all had a busy year, not just on the business side, but Tripp, you had a pretty big year personally.
Yeah, super blessed and thankful. It's been a really tough market in Central Texas, but we've been able to shift and meet a lot of clients' needs, and we're really thankful that we were able to get a lot of those big deals done in such a difficult market. But I think it just shows, our resiliency and then how many people want to be in Austin long term. I think it speaks a lot to that, even when it's tough to get capital. So.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say you got married.
Oh, on a personal level, yes. Very big year. Got married. Allison joined the team, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah.
More of a family office. So amazing year personally, and we've been super excited. Married life's great. So
yeah. And y'all went on I think your honeymoon was in Italy. So I was surprised you came back from that because I know Italy's pretty unbelievable.
It's pretty awesome for sure. But super thankful that we live in America.
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten used to having all the optionality. But yeah, Italy's beautiful. Could definitely stay there for a while.
We didn't talk about it as part of what we were going to talk about today, but I'm interested just being in real estate. Whenever you travel, it's pretty interesting to think about real estate wherever you go. Was there anything when you're in Italy that you're immediately thinking about?
That's all I do when I travel. It's the first thing I start looking at, and it was crazy because we're on the Amalfi Coast, and there is zero development. You just can't develop there. We ended up meeting a local lady that was from Houston that's lived there for 30 years, and she has her own limoncello farm at her house.
Wow.
And she was saying how, you can't, redevelop or even, get a permit to redo your house. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow, that's incredible.
Anti-development.
Yeah.
So the opportunity, it brings light to me for how lucky we are to live in, America where capitalism is king, and it's we were over there doing what we do for a living, we wouldn't have a job. So
yeah,
it is really interesting.
Yeah. On that note, Tim, you sent me that podcast not too long ago. I can't remember the guy's name. It's Tom
Bilyeu.
Yeah, Tom Bilyeu.
Yeah.
And he was talking about America and how we're in so much debt and how we can't take it for granted that we're a leading country in the world. We have to be careful. And with China and everything going on, he's like, but some people are just okay if we become like Italy and just kind of fade into the background. I thought that was so funny because I was like, that's interesting because Italy is a pretty amazing place to visit. But to your point, they're not one of the major players anymore on the world stage. And we are. And, that brings up a lot of interesting things, but it actually makes me think of one thing we did talking about is President Trump sitting here last year. I think we recorded that episode, and then he just came into office that week.
Mm.
And so everything was speculation on what was going to happen with him and what the impacts were going to be. But it'd be interesting to talk for a minute just about the impact that his first year had of this term, and then what we kind of are thinking may transpire this year. Tim, you were ready to make some predictions that I'd said were pretty bold because it's pretty hard to know with our president what he's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about last year, just there was so much optimism in the business community and excitement about Trump being in office and, what this year, what 2025 could look like because of that. And there were concerns about, he's talked about tariffs. Will that be a big part of his, this term? And, is he going to take action on that right away? And so we talked about that. And, it was a tumultuous year in a lot of ways with Trump. I mean, he definitely acted on tariffs in a way that surprised me a little bit. I mean, we knew that he would use it as a negotiating technique, and he did. You and I talked, Tom, before we started recording. It actually had less of an impact in a real way on construction prices and on the actual Texas real estate market It had a big psychological impact, I think, on the industry and on the stock market, especially back in April when he had his Liberation Day and kind of started everything. But I think now that we've had a year of Trump and we're going into the second year of Trump, and to me, a big thing to think about is with midterms coming up. The prediction I think you're talking about that I've made is I think it's going to be a little bit more of a calibrated year for Trump, that he's not going to want to do anything too big that would really impact midterms. Now, saying that, Trump is Trump, so he's going to do a lot of stuff, and there's going to be things that happen, and he's going to make waves in different areas, and he's going to get in fights with people, online, like he always does. But I do think that the Republicans want to stay in power through midterms. I think Trump knows he needs that if he wants to do anything the second half of his term. So I would expect that he's a little bit more careful. Hopefully don't invade Venezuela or do anything that really rocks things. But he's a wild card. You never know what's going to happen with him.
Yeah, I think a storyline of last year, going back and listening to our predictions podcast, there was so much just bullishness in the market, and we made it to 2025, and we should start to see deliveries, start to wane in some of these markets just because it's been so hard to get deals done for a couple of years. But then interest rates really didn't come down. And it was interesting because I listened to what we said about that last year, and we saw that change in the fourth quarter. And Tim, I think it was a quote that you made that kind of the September timeframe of 2024, there was speculation like rates might be coming down 200 basis points in 2025, like significant. But then what you said on the episode last year in January was we started to see that shift in November, December, coming into the Christmas holiday, where they started to say, rates might not actually really go down. We may not lower them, and they may not just not really go down very much, like 25, 50 basis points. They could even potentially go up. So we were kind of prepared for pretty flat rates, but we started the year off really fast as a company with just multifamily developers making a lot of offers in all of our markets and putting sites under contract. But then a lot of those deals didn't make it almost even out of the first quarter.
It was really another false start.
Yeah, totally.
For another year in a row.
Yeah, it was a false start because you had rates didn't come down. Liberation Day happened. The tariff situation happened. And what you're saying, Tim, is so true. It's not that now all these deals started costing more to build. It was that now we just don't know. And there's uncertainty, and there was a lot of fear around China and what's going to happen with those tariffs. And so we just kind of weathered this like several month period of people were just kind of like frozen and couldn't do anything. So that was definitely a big storyline.
I think, we'll continue to see rates, maybe come down a little bit more, but I think we've all talked and agree we don't see a substantial drop in rates, back to maybe 21, 22 kind of levels, which if we did see that would really boost the market. You made a point earlier, Tom, about how it's so hard to underwrite deals because we don't know what cap rates look like in the future, what construction costs look like, where rents are going to be. That's a question mark on all three of those. That in a typical market, you can have more of a basis for guessing as a developer and underwriting in a way you can get confident in. There's a lot of question marks, looking out into next year. And even beyond that, I think we'll maybe discover a lot in 2026 of what it's going to look like going forward through the rest of the decade.
Yeah, trying to time the market right now is really difficult. I was talking to a developer yesterday that his company's backed by just a really wealthy individual, so they can purchase land. They still don't really want to. They still want to buy sites that they know they can develop. But what he said was like, if interest rates go down, I think he said 50 basis points. He's like, this deal is going to make sense. And so for them, he's trying to decide, like, should we just take the risk knowing that we might have to sit on it like 3 months, or we might have to sit on it like 2 years, like, because we just don't know. And they're trying to decide that right now because they've been frustrated. A lot of these developers they have capital in some cases, and they've been on the sidelines for a couple of years. And we all know, like, developers do not want to stay on the sidelines.
They got to keep their jobs.
Yeah.
They got to keep building.
Yeah. So, and generating fees and, so yeah, it's just really important. But what else would you guys say about more of the macro market? We've hit rates a little bit. We've hit, Trump and maybe what we could see him do. But some of the other thoughts on just the macro market that we're going to be in 2026.
I think, my bold prediction for the year is that we're going to see the 2026 with the year of the struggling consumer. I think that's the biggest story. I think it's bigger than rates. I think it's bigger than whatever Trump will do or not do. Those things have an impact, and those things especially can have an acute impact where news breaks and the market reacts to it. But I think the more significant long-term impact through this year is that we are seeing a consumer in the United States, especially the bottom half of the market, It is really beat up by inflation. People have a lot of consumer debt. There's more and more questions that concern me about AI starting to take jobs. A lot of major corporations announcing significant layoffs, even with white collar workers. Amazon has announced recently 14,000 white collar workers will be laid off. So I don't know how big of a deal that is in 2026 in a real sense. The AI is going to start taking all of our jobs. But even if you have a small percentage, 5% of the workforce is worried that that could happen with their job. And on top of that, they're struggling with, some consumer debt that's piled up. Real wages haven't gone up materially in a long time. The people are not taking risks, and we're seeing that especially with multifamily rents in Houston. They're soft. Talked to a lot of developers who are saying, typically seasonally you have rent soften a little bit in the wintertime. There's not as much leasing velocity, but they're saying this isn't seasonal. This is beyond seasonal. Like people are not signing new leases. And I think especially the younger generation, people are living at home longer. They're just not wanting to go out there and sign a lease or buy a home like they were. So I think we're seeing it in the single family market and the multifamily market. And I think that's the thing that I'm the most concerned about and probably watching the most closely.
Now, Tripp, are you seeing the impacts of that at all in Austin?
Yeah, I think it's trickling down into even retail tenants and even like industrial tenants. There's been a huge flight to quality, but a lot of the existing tenants today are even getting kind of skittish, and retail development's been really hot in Austin for a while, but we're seeing tenants really want to start focusing and having the flexibility and where they want to go, and they don't want to commit to these super long-term leases because I think they're also unsure of where that's going to head. What you were talking about, Tim, I think it's all trickling down into, consumer, like the consumers are affecting retail tenants because, we're a consumer society. So that's what we depend on. And then in regards to single family, multifamily, same thing. We've really seen it be impacted in the suburbs where there's a more affordable, housing and rental opportunities. Even today, it's just been a big struggle, and rents are extremely soft and home values are down significantly. Surprisingly, though, we've seen the opposite in the urban infill. We're getting incredibly strong rents and lease up, but it's just a much higher paying job group of people, and so it's really interesting to watch. But we're definitely feeling it in suburbs. Yeah.
Tripp, is that because there's more barriers to entry in the infill market in Austin and just not as much supply, or is it just that that's where the workers, like you're saying, kind of this higher paid worker lives and wants, works maybe and wants to live, and that's the difference?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but it's definitely where people want to live. Absolutely. Austin's a really unique city, and it is extremely hard to develop in the urban infill. And because of that, we haven't seen that much supply outside of downtown, but we're getting $5 rents in some of our high rises downtown.
Yeah, gosh.
Whereas
insane.
we're getting $1.30 rents in our suburban garden deals. So the gap is just pretty incredible. But I definitely think it's a combination of the both.
Yeah, I mean, Austin has that like celebrity status that Tim referenced last year about comparing it to San Francisco and just the number of like podcasts based out of there and celebrities that want to be there. And then all the tech influence in Austin as well, the question I was going to ask you, Tripp, was with what Tim's talking about with AI. In a lot of ways, I know AI has been around longer than just 2025, but 2025 was like a massive year for AI and just really came onto the scene with so many advancements and so many like upgrades and ChatGPT and different platforms. And so I think we're now starting to realize that, it could be changing the landscape pretty quickly, pretty significantly. I know that Dallas is getting more and more tech jobs, but Austin having so many tech jobs. Have you seen a change with that? Like, is that positive, negative?
There's been a couple of changes. One of them is that we've seen a lot of the larger tech companies start to make people go back into the office, and that's made a huge impact. And then we also have a lot of big users, and so that demand's starting to increase pretty significantly. They're looking to move to Austin, relocate to Austin, which is pretty exciting for us because that helps support that, the infill multifamily development. So it's been pretty interesting to watch all that play out.
Yeah, what's so impressive about Austin is when you just go see what's been built, there's so many incredible projects, like huge high rises. And even comparing that to like Houston, Dallas, we're a lot bigger cities, but we don't have those type of buildings. I mean, it's unbelievable. You guys have the tallest building west of the Mississippi, then you have it like 4 more times.
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
they keep building it there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this ego contest to see who can build the highest building. But yeah.
There's a big difference too between Austin and especially Houston and probably Dallas too, that are like our downtown is pretty much dying. I mean, it's not great. You don't want to people work down there, but you don't want to go down there at night and go to restaurants or hang out really. And Austin is just unbelievable. We were there for your wedding trip and just being like staying downtown, going to dinner downtown, walking and driving around. It's such a cool city. It's so beautiful and everything's so nice. Don't spend as much time in Dallas. I know Dallas has some cool infill areas too, but it just seems like Austin's so unique from that standpoint.
Yeah. I think a lot of that's due to the geography. It's just really, we're a vertical city. You can't develop out west or east. And so there's just not any more land in the urban infill really. And so it's just very hard to develop. It's very dense in the urban core, and the city's actually done a pretty good job of allowing that, and it's constantly changing, which is nice. But yeah, I mean, 7 days a week, downtown, South Congress, constantly tens of thousands of people walking around, very vibrant, especially once Google and Facebook made their employees start coming back into the office. So,
Well, that'll help a lot with rents, urban too. Because if you're not, if you're not working from home in the suburbs now and you have to come into the office.
I think that's part of the big surge. I mean, the rents that we're seeing is crazy what people are paying. I mean, it's, more than a mortgage on an infill home, depending on where you are, to live in these high rises. But I think these people from California and New York get here and they can rent, 2,000 square foot apartment for 10 grand a month. And they're like, oh, that's cheap for us.
Yeah.
So it's wild. Yeah.
Well, two other kind of macro things that we talk a lot about would be construction costs and then would be rental rates. And so maybe rental rates is the most natural way to go from what we were just talking about with consumer spending and just the consumer, because I think that there's a belief that we have all this development that has been really difficult to get out of the ground. And so there was a lot that was developed post-COVID. There was a massive wave of construction. But then when interest rates spiked, so probably anything like post 22, 23, 24, and now 25, development pipeline is significantly reduced. But with that, are we really going to see the rental rate increases that people are talking about? Because yes, we have population growth. Yes, we have job growth. But can the consumer afford to just go now spend a lot more money on their rent? And I don't know if that we're going to see that type of growth that a lot of people believe that we might see.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting theory and question. But I think for Austin specifically, we will, because we've had such little amount of development in the urban core outside of the high rises. I honestly do think we're going to continue to see rents grow in certain submarkets in the urban infill. We're already having, we had a group the other day that brought a deal out to market on a wrap project and ended up taking it off the market, even though they achieved their pricing, because their renewals were 5% higher than what they were already getting. They were getting like $3 rents, and now they're renewing between like $310 and $320. So they're taking it off the market and turning over all of those units. They're going to take it back out at the beginning of the year. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
I think that's pretty interesting. If you just thought about kind of, on the scale, like temperature wise, how hot or cold these markets are, because that's pretty encouraging, Tripp, that with the supply, because I think everybody talks about, Austin and the supply and everybody's scared and everything, but, seeing those kind of rents and that kind of growth is pretty impressive. And Houston has been kind of the opposite in our suburban and our infill market, especially the infill market. There's been very little supply, but we still have soft rents, like in places like the Heights, where there's like 2 deals that are in lease up, and nothing really was leasing up before that, and nothing leasing up after that for a long time. But still seeing soft rents, and then seeing them in the suburbs as well. So that's just an interesting point, looking kind of from market to market. There's enough influx of new jobs and people with money who are looking at Austin and still signing leases compared to Houston, where the market just feels a little bit more stagnant and soft. Where would you put Dallas, Tom, kind of on that? I know it's probably submarket sensitive, but.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think that's a really good point that Tripp made, because the urban Austin market sounds like there's a lot of reason to believe rents will go up. But then I think where my question was these areas have had a lot of supply, like the suburbs. Like, how quickly are those rents going to really just like bounce back?
I don't think they are anytime soon. I think it could be years. We were a couple of years ago, we were chasing selling a ton of suburban multi-sites, and those same rents at that time were $1.90 to $2 a foot. And those same deals are now $1.30 to $1.50, depending on the suburb. I mean, some of them are still getting pretty strong rents, but it's very few and far between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, I think, here. But I think that's where we've helped a lot of our clients understand you can't just say Austin, you can't just say Dallas, you can't just say Houston. It's like our cities are so large that there's areas where it makes a lot of sense to develop. And then there's areas where we would say like it might be years. But you can't just be like, well, it's going to be years in all of Austin, or it's going to be, it's going to all bounce back. And so that's a great point that you're making about that. I think in Dallas, it's similar. I think in all of our markets, the urban markets are underdeveloped because all of the equity was chasing low basis, suburban, surface park projects for the most part. And so you had a handful of high rises, but very few urban projects developed. So like Dallas, for example, we have our inner loop, 635. Houston has 610, so these loops around the cities. And in Dallas, we were talking to one of our clients that's based here, and they were saying they're under construction on a wrap. So it's stick construction, structure parking. And he said it's one of 2 wraps under construction inside of 635 in Dallas. And it's a function of like land availability, land pricing, land that's large enough for a wrap. That's an issue here. That I know that's definitely an issue in Austin. It's like, how far out do you have to go from the core to find enough land for a wrap? It's like so hard. And that's the problem with a lot of the urban Dallas markets, that I don't know when they're going to bounce back, just because the sites are like an acre to 2 acres and the rents are $2 rents.
Yeah. It just
So
doesn't make
it's
sense.
just not even close to making sense. And so if those were, 8-acre sites, you could go do surface park high density deals there and it'd work great.
Sure.
But it doesn't. So I think that's an interesting point. And I think, Tim, what I was saying earlier that you alluded to was, I think the development market would say, the pricing we saw in 21 and 22, where maybe we had really elevated pricing, like a site that was worth 200 a square foot, they may say, well, today it's worth like 75 a foot. But the point I was making was, I don't think we really know yet. And developers never really know because they're having to build ahead. But with construction pricing where it is, because it is down, and with rents, I do believe they are going to bounce back in some submarkets. So you really can't underwrite them today. I think that those land prices are probably not, 75 a foot, and maybe they're also not 200, but it might be like 150. It might actually be a lot stronger. And that's what we'll hopefully start to see as the market starts to price these properties better. And we just get the reset. Just been a lot to work through since interest rates spiked and so many people got caught holding land and holding on to land. And so I think rents are a big part of that. And then let's talk a little bit about construction pricing, because I think that's, to me, would be the most positive thing that we're seeing right now is we are seeing construction costs come down. We said that last year, and we've continued to see it all throughout 2025 and into this year. Do you guys have any thoughts or things you're hearing on the construction side?
I mean, the only thing I would just say is that they're down, like you said, they're probably likely going to stay down. I don't think, like in Houston, we're going to see a big surge of supply that would prop them up. We are seeing single family slow down quite a bit in Houston on the home sale side, and the builders not wanting to do as many deals as they did, in 25 and 24. So I think that's going to help, keep a lid on pricing. I don't know that it's going to move significantly up or down, but I think we'll still see lower pricing than we saw, prior to rates coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's continued. I think I had a quote last year on our episode that we had a project that the price was down about 15% year over year. So like 2024 to the beginning of 2025, I think that same project's probably down another 5 to 7% at this point. They're already under construction, but that's the type of continued movement we've seen just because there's not very many projects. It's just again, the sub bases we're so busy doing so many projects, like so many. And now when you reduce that by a third or a fifth or, whatever it is, depending on the market, then there's going to be some really good opportunity there from a pricing standpoint. And that's really significant because on a lot of these deals, that's 10, 15, $20 million potentially in savings. And so I think something we're going to see, and you mentioned, Tripp, this last year that you expected to see this in Austin in 2025, the people and the developers, the landowners and developers that bought land in 21 and 22 and then didn't move forward on their projects, they've just been like holding on. And a lot of them got debt. Yeah. So they're just holding on. And that's what we've seen here. They keep extending because a lot of them, it's 3-year notes. So you bought it in 21, it was up in 24. Now they've extended it for however many months or 18 months. Some of them, it's going to be coming due this next year. I really think in 26, it's not that we're going to just see a ton of deals because the market's on fire. We're going to see a lot of transactions because you're going to have deals just trading hands. People need to get out of deals. Some of them
Agreed.
will make a little bit of money. Some of them will go out at par, and some people are going to have to just take a big write-off. But that's going to make a lot more sense because you might be in a market where it could be years
Right.
until it comes back.
Mm.
And we've seen, I'd say, quite a few more foreclosures on the land side in DFW in 2025 than we had seen, in the couple years before that, just because so many people were getting these 3-year loans.
Yeah, we've already started experiencing it as well. People wanting to get out of sites and potentially take haircuts. But yeah, the whole extend and pretend thing just continues to happen. But I think for Austin for 26, I think we're going to see like a level out, and ultimately, kind of it's going to be like a figuring it out year for a lot of these landowners and developers that have debt. I'm predicting that we're going to see a market reset, but I've been saying that for a few years now, so we'll see what happens.
You said extend and pretend. That I don't understand why people think that they can get away with that. There's so many deals I could just rattle off right now where it's like a landowner or a developer that it has no chance of getting their project built. I've got text threads with guys from like the last 2 years, and it's 2 years of I'm breaking ground next month. And I know, like, we've talked to their capital, we've talked to the bank, like they are holding on by fingernails, and it's totally extend and pretend.
Absolutely.
And like, it's, I don't see it getting better enough that they're going to get out of the ground. Like, they're losing the property and they've passed up on opportunities to get out. It blows my mind, like, how these people sleep at night knowing that they're not going to be able to make it. It's crazy.
No, same here. Honestly, the way that I look at it is I think that the banks don't want it on their books. I think they keep giving it to them because they're like, we don't know what it's worth. We don't know where the market is. We don't know what to do with this. And so we're trying to connect with those banks and those landowners that are mostly developers and just say, hey, look, like, you can take some money and get away with it, or potentially even make a little bit of profit if you just get out now. But I've been telling those same guys the same thing for the past 3 years now. And it's interesting to see. I think the smart ones, got out and have moved on. And a lot of those guys that we're selling those sites for now are some of the best developers in Austin.
Yeah. So Tripp, as you're talking about banks, one thing I've noticed is that some of these loans, well, maybe not some, probably most of these loans are actually at a pretty good basis.
Mhm.
I've seen a couple where I'm like, okay, yeah, I can't bring an offer like above the debt and it makes sense. But on the land deals, I think the banks were pretty conservative with the percent they would get, probably 50% loans, something like that. And so there's several where it would make a lot of sense for the banks to actually take them back.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's where it's like, hey, if you're a bank listening, give us a call because we can help you sell these notes for some good values. Because yeah, I mean, there's one I'm thinking of, the note's like 2.3 million.
Mhm.
And we've made offers on the site for like over, 7 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're not all like that, but I would say the majority, probably 80%, they're pretty good. And then there's like 20% where it's like, yeah, that you shouldn't have given an 80% loan. I'm sorry.
The note sale has been a big trend. I think third and fourth quarter of 2025, and they all continue this year. Just seeing a lot of banks, I think to Tripp's point, they don't want to take land back. I mean, even if it could theoretically be worth a lot more, they just don't want it on their books. So if they can go sell it, and Tom, you said in Dallas, some of these banks are getting 100% for these notes, which is incredible. During the Great Recession, we would sell notes for 30 cents on the dollar. So if they can get out of the note and get their money back, I think you'll see more and more of that happen this year because they don't want to keep extending. The whole extend and pretend thing works if it's like a 2-year situation, but if it's going to be a 5-year or 7-year deal, they want to get that capital back and put it to work. So it makes a lot of sense to see more note sales as a way for banks to, recycle capital.
I mean, I think it's interesting too, because I think a lot of these banks aren't educated on where market values are. I think a lot of them are looking at appraisal values, which we know are not necessarily market. And then the other half of that is a lot of these landowners just not wanting to let go. The people that own the sites, and they're still performing on their loan, and the bank can't make them sell it. And so it is pretty interesting.
It's a great point. What is market value? It's so hard because on land deals, it has everything to do with timing. Because if we're asked to do a BOV, we can tell you what your land is worth, but that also could be like what your land is worth if you're patient versus what your land's worth if you have to sell it in the next 3 months and like close it And those are probably like very different numbers.
Vastly different numbers.
I had a pretty funny conversation with a guy the other day. So he's been under contract 3 times to sell his property, and it's been dropped by developers. And he had seen that Ascent, our investment fund, had recently closed on a deal in Austin. And so he called me and, talking about the deal, and asked me, would we be interested in his site? And I, know what he's asking for it, and it's a development site. And I was like, yeah, I mean, we would be interested in it. He's like, well, could you do like a 30-day close like you guys have done on some other stuff? And I was like, yeah, we could do that. But I was like, but what would the price be? And I explained like the risk we're taking. There's some site plan work. And he's like, I mean, we'd be willing to discount it, like, from 6.5 to 5.5 million if you guys close in 30 days. I'm like, so the deal's been dropped 3 times at this value, and I get a very marginal discount. And I was just like, honestly, what we see is like the discount needs to be a minimum of 40%, minimum to even just be interested. And we're passing on those type of deals. It has, because you're taking that kind of risk, you got to be getting paid for the risk. But I think that's hard for people to understand, because it's like, well, it's worth more, but it's not worth more if I have to close in 30 days.
And that's how land is different from investment sales, or really a residential real estate, anything else. Because if you're talking about someone selling their home or someone selling an investment sale property, a 20% discount, going from 6.5 to 5.5 would be an incredible deal. That's a massive move on price. In the land business, a lot of times a 50% discount is where it needs to be if you're talking about a really fast close versus a developer needing maybe a year to get the deal closed. And there's tons of transaction risk with that. And people just never understand that with land. They think it's like some simple sale, like they're selling a stock or something, and the price doesn't really fluctuate. But timing is a huge impact to price.
So we're going to stop the episode there just because of the length of the conversation that Tim and Tripp and I had. And then we'll pick it up next week with a second part to just the storylines and the trends of both 2025 and then what we expect to see in 2026. So thank you for listening. Definitely reach out to us with any questions, and looking forward to giving you the next episode.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. If you have questions about land you own in Texas, send us an email at texaslandguys@dmre.com and follow us on LinkedIn to stay updated.